Thunderstruck, written by Merlos the Mad, read for you by Nocturnal Nightmare. Chapter 10, Zip Zap. The air began to hum and vibrate, a fact that Sweetie Belle and Stephanie were only distantly aware of. Sweetie's own senses were quickly and entirely overwhelmed, the same as her thoughts. A violet light had grown in intensity from somewhere close by, completely obscuring her vision of the room. She was aware that once again she was feeling that strange word that she did not like very much. Afraid, Sweetie recalled.
I'm afraid, but I can't do anything.
Her body felt achy and her head felt floaty. Both of those were new, but the worst new thing was that she couldn't see Stephanie anymore. Moving didn't seem possible. Her gears and motors were all either locked up or spasming, and her voice wasn't doing what she wanted either. The static noise that filled the room had to be coming from her, preventing a call for help from getting out. She hoped that Stephanie knew what was happening and how to fix her, like so many times before. Stephanie had to. She was so smart. She could surely figure out something to do. Sitting still across the room on the floor's concrete, Stephanie couldn't believe her own eyes. She stared in shock at Sweetie Belle and whatever it was that was happening to her. Without explanation, her machine turned mystery had apparently become an out-of-control sparkler, filling the room with noise and chaos. The sparks poured from Sweetie's mouth, her eyes, the open compartment, everywhere, all while she rattled as if coming apart. The light show flashed across the walls, danced over the remnants of the day's mess, and cast a glow across Stephanie's bewildered expression. Overhead, the ceiling lights flickered erratically, increasing the chaos further.
Crap! Double crap! What do I do?
Stephanie's mind raced. Strangely acting animated robots aside, nothing happening made enough sense for her to wrap her head around. All she had done was re-enable something that was part of Sweetie. Maybe it had caused Sweetie's reaction, but surely it couldn't be what was responsible. Her frantic thought trail led her to a dead end, at least as far as rational possibilities were concerned. There was another explanation, though, something Stephanie knew had no right to even be considered as a possibility, especially since no one as logical and learned as she.
Magic?
Stephanie gulped, knowing it couldn't be that.
No, magic's not real. That would be ridiculous. She short-circuited somehow.
Sweetie's static noises squelched loudly again, and Stephanie screamed, her hands covered her ears. She scrunched up inwardly where she sat, legs held close, but was shaken back to her senses.
What can I even do? Think.
The sparks were still flying, and the risk of fire suddenly occurred to her.
Maybe I should get the extinguisher.
"Steph, please render assistance!" Sweetie Belle's voice cried out. Suddenly working, the static was also gone. Stephanie stood up. "Hold on, I'm coming to help!" She wasn't at all sure how, but a reassurance felt right, and it was all she had to give. Her hands were balled up in panic, but she resolutely started at least something. Ignoring the lack of protection from the shower of sparks, Stephanie hunched over her little machine's open panel again, face turned partially away. The thing that made the most sense to her was undoing what she had just done.
I swear, if we make it out of this alive, I'll...
She didn't have time to finish her oath. Just as her hand reached for the minuscule switch that had somehow caused the commotion, something instead reached out and stopped her. Purple electricity arched out of Sweetie Belle's electronics and danced up Stephanie's arm before she could even reach the switch. Ouch! Stephanie toppled to her rear, gingerly clutching her hand close to herself. There was pain like a dozen needles from just as many doctor visits. The stinging faded, leaving her hand numb, but she didn't have time to check how bad she'd been hurt. Steph? Sweetie Belle and Stephanie locked eyes. Sweetie, I don't know what to do. Stephanie froze. Sweetie was seemingly done with her shaking and frightening spark flinging, replacing it instead with a deep purple glow that shone behind her eyes, transforming them from green. She mumbled something that was difficult to make out. I feel... Stephanie's eyes widened more and more. Suddenly, she was thinking about an old TV show, for all the good it seemed to do. The name Equestria popped up through her oldest memories, but none of them told her any answers in the brief 4 or 5 seconds that she had sat motionless. The glow's intensity was growing, peeking out of joints and plating across Sweetie's body. Once the light had filled the room, Sweetie began to lift off the ground, floating on thin air a few inches, and then a few more. Her limp, scorched tail was the last part of her to leave the concrete. The only sound remaining in the room was a strange hum that began to get louder. Stephanie only managed to drop her jaw open dumbly. Okay, she whispered. Now she was completely at a loss. Her brain successfully checked out over at the front desk. Sweetie Belle? Hey, what are you doing? What's happening? She really didn't expect an answer, less so when it was clear her voice was drowned out by the hum. Stephanie watched as Sweetie came to a stop in the middle of the room, then realized she'd been staring instead of doing something helpful. Hey, Sweetie! There was a force in the air, almost a strong wind pushing her away. She skid back on her butt several feet before she regained traction. Hey! Sweetie Belle's mouth hung open, as if about to speak, but didn't. Stephanie cupped her hands and tried shouting. Are you okay? That didn't seem likely. Say something! Her eyes darted around briefly for a fire that thankfully wasn't there, and she forced herself to stand up with some difficulty. She looked down at her hand. It wasn't burned, thankfully, just tingly, then back up at Sweetie. I don't know what to do! Sweetie Belle continued to remain quiet and float, but she did close her eyes, as well as shiver and curl in on herself. On reflexes, powered purely by adrenaline, Stephanie hit the deck as something soared right where her head had just been. Great jumping! She cursed, landing on her hands and knees. All around the room, bars of purple light lanced out from their spot of origin, Sweetie Belle. One struck a nearby wall, and suddenly a giant rose bush, rooted in place, popped out of thin air. Another hit the basement stereo, and what seemed like a miniature windmill stood in its place instead. A third hit the basement's mainframe, transforming the delicate storage units into a pile of accordions. The instruments wheezed weakly as they slumped over in a messy pile. Stephanie's fearful look turned into disgusted horror for a split second. She had to stare at her precious molested electronics. What is going on? Just in time, she dodged out of the way of more beams of light, their number growing and hid behind a table. A second later and the table itself and its legs replaced by giant springs. Sweetie Belle, please stop! Stephanie peeked over the edge. She watched in denial over what was transpiring in her technological sanctuary. Her panic deepened until harshly and with effort she reeled her mind back in.
I've got to think of something. Crap, crap, crap! Okay, calm down, Steph. Your robot that's come alive is having a nuclear meltdown. What to do?
Stephanie thought hard, watching as her chair turned into what looked like a squat bowl of ice cream. Stephanie's expression petrified, transfixed on the former chair. In a flash, she pulled back behind the punny cover offered by her lab table.
Okay, I have no idea what to do. None. When does anyone prepare themselves to deal with something like this? I don't even think I can get to the door, let alone fix this.
The thought of being turned into an appliance while trying to make a break for it didn't sit well with her. Stephanie peeked through the transformed legs of her work table, catching sight of Sweetie. The equine-like machine's expression was difficult to read, being so simple, but it still didn't look pleasant. Whatever was happening, the noise in the room was slowly growing louder.
I have to do something.
Stephanie swallowed hard. Her memories tried to dredge up something that could help, but all she'd gotten were a bunch of old movie scenes and cartoons. Her background in machinery certainly didn't offer any suggestions. No, she had to try something else, something non-scientific. Sweetie Belle! Stephanie yelled, the name as loud as she could, just bordering on a scream that made her voice crack. You gotta calm down! Whatever you're doing is dangerous! Please stop! She watched with the mild safety of cover, hoping to see a reaction. Sweetie shifted slightly. Stephanie waited, the colors of the room flowing like water across the walls, then tried again. Try to get control of it. If all of this was inside you, you can control it. The logical part of her still said magic wasn't real, but she knew she had to adapt to the situation. Another burst of static answered, which slowly resolved into Sweetie's voice. Stephanie, help! I don't know what to do. It's confusing me. Stephanie stood up on instinct, ignoring the beams that whizzed past. Despite her confusion, she found words to respond with, encouraging ones. That's okay. Just don't be afraid. I'm here. Try and focus your senses. Suddenly, she wished she'd listened harder to her friends when they would quote Star Wars Jedi. You can do it. I know you can. You'll be okay. Stephanie bit her lip. She didn't know what else to say, and wasn't sure if any of it would be help at all. Sweetie Belle didn't respond, instead continuing to defy gravity in the middle of the room. Stephanie called out again, hoping for an answer. Sweetie Belle? Then she stared in wonder as the hum in the room dissipated and the crazy beams of light stopped altogether. Everything happened quickly and with very little fanfare after that. The giant stained glass mosaic on the wall transformed back into being the tool shelves. In the corner, what could only be described as the world's largest spice rack once again became a series of monitors. One by one, the furniture and articles in the room all quickly and peacefully reverted back to their original states in a smaller, milder shower of purple sparks and soft poof noises. Stephanie's jaw resumed hanging open in a show of complete disbelief. Eventually she looked back to the original cause of the anomalies. The rest of the glow in the room faded, and the basement lights overhead ceased their constant flickering. Sweetie Belle still hung in the air. Her expression hardened, but looked less scared and desperate. Then, in the span of a second, the remaining glow around her disappeared with a loud pop, and she was falling. Stephanie gasped and dove forward. "Hang on!" Stephanie performed a stage slide across the smooth floor, and her old machine landed unceremoniously in her lap. "Ooh, ow! Hey, are you all right?" She stayed weary, almost a little surprised that she hadn't been burned or something. She ran a hand over Sweetie's face. "Sweetie?" Sweetie Belle opened her eyes slowly once she heard Stephanie's voice, then blinked rapidly, taking in the light. Her eyes, which were apparently made in China, as she'd only just noticed, adjusted to focus on Stephanie's face. Malfunction?" She smiled upwards, feeling something called embarrassment. Stephanie sighed with relief. "That was sure a doozy of a malfunction. Are you sure you're okay? How many fingers am I holding up? And just what happened? What did you do? With some difficulty, she bit back more words, wincing. She felt lightheaded. Sweetie Belle laughed weakly, while Steph ranted. She wasn't sure why she did, but relieved as she was to feel right. "Yes, I'm okay. And you're holding up 3 fingers. Is that a game?" Her response was almost rapid-fire quick. "And I don't know exactly what happened, or what exactly I did. I'm a little worried, since you didn't either." After a moment of studying Stephanie's look of loss, she shyly added, "But I think it might actually be safe to say that it was all your fault, Steph. You flipped my switch after all, and I calculate a 96.7% likelihood that it was responsible for whatever just happened." Stephanie listened in somber acceptance at first, until the part where blame was shifted soundly on her shoulders. "Excuse me? My fault? Okay, Missy, you listen here. You told me to do it, first off, and second—" She was cut off when a gentle shaking ran through Sweetie, and lighter of a trickling, relieved sort of fell on her chrome muzzle. Stephanie grinned, understanding. "You butt!" Laughing a little herself, she pushed away some of the scorched mane in Sweetie's eyes. Sweetie stared up, feeling very peaceful. All considering, the words life-threatening danced through her vocabulary briefly. Still, her fear was all but gone. Thankfully, it had seemed obvious who was to thank for it. Stephanie went on. "Well, whatever just happened, we're never touching that thing again." Sweetie let out a small "aww" of disappointment. "Should I leave the switch on?" Sweetie Belle asked plainly. She stared up expectantly at Steph in earnest. "It's still on?" Stephanie felt her heart leap again, and had to stop from standing up and spilling Sweetie onto the floor. She calmed down, though, and forced herself to listen to her rational side.
Circuits don't turn mouse pads into pies, Stephanie. They don't.
Stephanie cleared her throat and absently ran a hand through Sweetie's mane, instead, and repeated herself more calmly. "It's still on? And you're all right? You aren't hurt? I mean, you were—" She realized that if Sweetie wasn't all right, she had no idea what to actually do. It still felt a bit odd to be talking to a robot the way she was, but then she was quickly getting over that. Sweetie Belle smiled and nodded. Tilting her head, Stephanie seemed incredibly worried. It made Sweetie feel worried too, but it also made her feel like reassuring her. Yep, I'm all flashy green lights, and I'll remember those being good ones. Stephanie began pedaling her back legs slightly in the air as a show of ability, while standing up solely on her front hooves. Subsequently, she then trotted about in a circle as further demonstration. Her excitement returned to her, no longer being held. But anyway, Steph, did you see me zip-zap all those things? What did you think? It was... She concentrated, trying to grasp a good word. Cool? Unable to help it, Stephanie smirked. She was still caught somewhere between excitement and fainting over the ordeal. Cool? Stephanie's face whirred until she looked deeply confused. Wait, that's... My head says that a better word might be amazing, or astonishing, or astounding, or stunning, or staggering, or... Okay, I get the idea, sweetie. Stephanie face-palmed. Sweetie blinked, then smiled and clanged slightly as she shifted her stance. Okay, she repeated back, and giggled. So, what does ambient temperature have to do with anything? Stephanie lowered her hand from her face and peeked out. Wait, what? Sweetie hummed and thought. You said cool is the word to describe the room, while it is slightly below... Stephanie finally caught on, groaned. Ugh. Cool means the same thing as amazing, and those other words, sweetie. It's slang. Ah, I see. Sweetie briefly looked at the floor, then back up. Cool! She proceeded to scan over a good portion of slang words that she had access to in a commendable 1.1 seconds of processing time. They seemed quite interesting. So, did you see me zip-zap everything? It made me feel kind of... She trailed off, recalling how exactly she had felt. There was a good description for it, surely, but it escaped her. Stephanie sighed, trying to finish, calming down, while also keeping up with Sweetie. She stood up, inspecting her room, just in case one of her computers hadn't turned back from being a pinwheel. Oh yeah, that. I saw it all right. I'm still trying to believe it, too. At the same time, she tried to consider if it would have happened again. Sweetie had admitted that the thing that might have been responsible, the processor, was somehow still on, and Steph had caught a glimpse of the blinking green light it normally sported, too. Sweetie made a thinking kind of noise. But you saw it yourself. Why not believe it? Briefly, Stephanie's thought.
Did I have any cameras in the room that might have caught that?
She realized quickly that she didn't, and swore under her breath. Sweetie Belle tilted her head. She didn't quite understand why Steph had lowered her voice so much when she had said those last three words. The phrase seemed a bit odd and had other connotations. And what did her dictionary mean by labeled it as a curse word? She shrugged and filed it away, deciding to ask about it later. Well, I didn't mean that I don't believe it just happened. Stephanie wanted to do just that, actually. It was just... It shouldn't have been. She stared blankly at her little talking, thinking machine, pretty much at a loss for words. Sweetie Belle stared back patiently, expectantly. Luckily, she had saved upon spotting something new, and also located around Sweetie's metallic hindquarters. Oh, where, Sweetie? Look at your side panel. Sweetie Belle blinked, then twisted her neck around to look back. She found something different on the side of her panel on her rear left leg, the one that was still closed. Oh, that's new. Is that a sign of structural failure from the event? Scarring? Heat damage? It's a cutie mark, Stephanie mumbled. It's a cutie mark. Stephanie mumbled the phrase smoothly as it came to her. She knelt down, her eyes locked on Sweetie's metal flank. With her offhand she closed the still open panel that led to Sweetie's inner workings on the other side, revealing a match to the mark there as well. 5 lines of light green script, written in binary code, ran both sides of the Philibot. The code was written out plainly as 0110101 0110001 0110011 011010001 0110001. Stephanie blinked at it, decoding the binary slowly in her head. I think it says... Magic! Sweetie interrupted. She grinned and looked up at Stephanie, who acknowledged her with a nod. The cutie mark says magic! But what is a cutie mark? And what does it mean that I have one? Her grin melted into a frown, and she raised her voice. And why did Zip Zapping give me a random mark? Is it important or something? Oh no! Have I contracted a virus? I doubt that, sweetie. A thoughtful look crept over Stephanie, unable to handle yet another mystery to any effect. Eventually she murmured, But I don't think I know why you got the mark either. She thought about the way Sweetie Belle could not only feel emotions, but also things like heat and the cold, as if she wasn't made of metal. She thought about her room and the other unexplainable things that just happened. Strangely, she also felt a little less scary having witnessed everything. It occurred to her that maybe it was a part of being crazy. The basement fell silent for a moment. Finally, Sweetie Belle sighed and asked, Well, Steph, what do you know? Because I'm starting to rethink asking the TV my questions. Stephanie scowled. And later, I will teach you all about manners. She reached out and pinched Sweetie Belle's ear, pronouncing a pained ouch. Steph! Sweetie tried to pull her head away, which didn't work very well. Let go! That hurts! I don't like it! Stephanie held on, slightly bewildered. Wait, she can feel this? She thought, hesitating to let go. She didn't really know what counted as painful towards a robot, and eventually let go. Sweetie Belle stared back at her, looking wounded. I don't think I like learning manners either, she mumbled. Stephanie filed away her confusion and chuckled at Sweetie's behavior. Uh-huh. Well, you should definitely look up that definition anyway. I remember cutie marks being, well, representations of a special talent. So, apparently, this is what you're really good at. At least that's how she recalled a certain old show, which, in a way, was the only reason Sweetie Belle existed in the first place. She wondered for a moment what her curious newborn-like robot would make of the old show, were she to see it. Sweetie Belle oohed. A special talent? And my special talent is magic? Stephanie shrugged. I guess so, she replied, and ran a hand over the mark on her robot as she did. Sweetie paused to listen, then thought on a new word. Magic.
and drew up the definition for it. Magic, noun, 1. The power of apparently influencing the course of events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. Adjective, 1. Used in magic or working with magic, having or apparently having supernatural powers. 2. Wonderful or exciting. Her eyes widened more, taking in the implications of such a thing being tied to her. She dedicated a lot of processing power to consider it.
And that's for me? That's my special talent?
Her excitement faded a little, replacing itself with a thorough sense of confusion.
But I don't even know what that means, or what I did.
The sensations she had felt during the event had been strange, and they were gone now, too. Sweetie Belle hummed and thought. Stephanie smiled along with Sweetie while she chirped the definitions, until finally she stopped and seemed to think about it slowly to herself. The sight had been a little interesting, due mostly in part to Sweetie using her old robotic voice when she had spoken. Perhaps it was kind of a habit, or something, one that she had retained. Maybe or maybe not, but the bottom line was that Sweetie Belle was a mystery wrapped in an enigma. It was clear to Stephanie that there was a lot more to figure out, and not just stuff about Sweetie, but also what to do with her. She had a robot on her hands that not only ignored the way technology was supposed to work, but the rules of everything else too. Trying to consider how a filing cabinet had turned into an aquarium with actual fish wasn't something easy to do. There certainly wasn't a magic school she could go and get instructions at. And what could be done if Sweetie had a relapse and turned the house into a giant cream puff? All right, well, let's not stress over this too much now, Sweetie. Stephanie sighed in mild despair and straightened up, getting a little more sore from crouching for so long. Let's go upstairs and... The voice of GLaDOS entered the room as she abruptly wheeled through the open door, and called down from the top of the stairs. Stephanie, I hate to interrupt your subterranean reverie, but it scared the goat, unfortunately or not, depending on how you look at it. It escaped its pen again. I was subsequently unable to corral it, not that it's of any consequence to me. But you should probably go and take care of that, assuming you can fit your gargantuan hips out through the door to... Mm. Stephanie groaned loudly, muttering, "Crap, not again," and bolted up the stairs. If the goat had gotten out and ended up on a neighbor's yard or something, that could easily lead to a whole mess of lawsuits. GLaDOS, start the van! Sweetie Belle perked up at the signs of sudden excitement, and Stephanie raced upstairs. A goat? Why did he run away? What's a van? Oh, motorized transportation. A road trip. Can I come? Not waiting for an answer, she sped up the motors in her legs to maximum power. She noted there was a noticeable increase in their efficiency from their last use against the cat. Sweetie raced through the house and burst out the front door. What? Oh no! You should stay here, Sweetie. Sweetie Belle had somehow kept up with her the whole way to the front door. Out of habit, Steph had almost tried just to close the front door on her former appliance to keep it from wandering outside. This time, however, Sweetie had instead slipped her way out the door and fell in step. Stephanie gritted her teeth, thinking hard at the same time. She kept jogging out to her vehicle that was waiting.
I can't just leave Sweetie alone again. Can I... Oh man, but if Jeopardy headbutts the Johnson's dog again...
She caught sight of what she was sure was a scraggly blur of fur, bouncing happily through the neighbor's field. It seemed she was in luck. Geoffrey hadn't gotten far. Still, she knew there was no time to lose. "Sweetie, just wait here for a bit, okay? I'll be right back." She stopped to point at a random spot in the yard near the porch. "Inside would be better, actually. Could you wait inside? All right? Great." "Oh, okay. But what about my cutie mark and figuring out everything that you don't know about me?" Sweetie thought about that. If Steph didn't know things about her either, then who did? Also, what is magic? I have no further data on magic. Stephanie danced lightly in place. The door to her vehicle was sitting open. "We'll talk about you lots when I get back, sweetie. I'm sorry, but this can't wait." "Aw, I'll wait then, Steph." Sweetiebelle slowed her canter to a walk and watched as Stephanie climbed into her van, almost leaping. It seemed that Mr. Goat getting out was a big deal. She wondered just why that was, and why Mr. Goat would have to leave in the first place. Maybe he had somewhere important to be. The van door slammed shut. Stephanie breathed a sigh of relief, alone for the first time in ages, if only for a couple of minutes. At the same time, she guiltily considered that she was some way shirking an obligation to keep a watchful eye on what was essentially a child rather than a pet. Still, she was used to responsibility. Quickly, Steph backed the van out, and as she did, she looked worriedly back at Sweetiebelle, who had yet to leave the side of the driveway for the house. She tried not to worry too much. Geoffrey was in sight of the house after all. She just needed to go get him, lure him home, and all before Sweetie managed to get into something.
It'll be fine.
Stephanie told herself, and focused on driving.
Yep, perfectly fine.
Sweetiebelle tilted her head, watching as the van backed out of the driveway in a cloud of dust, then vroomed loudly and raced down the road, off on a quest to hunt down a goat. She realized after a bit of zooming and focusing with her eyes that Mr. Goat was actually not so far away. "Well, Stephanie told me to wait inside." Sweetiebelle stood up, her motors softly humming, and turned to do just that. "I guess I should listen to her." She had always listened to Stephanie before, as she recalled, never doing anything but exactly what she had been told. "Hopefully we'll finally do something fun when she gets back, though." Sweetiebelle cut off and stopped to stare at something new. Her eyes widened and her cameras refocused as a strange sense of wonder and curiosity filled her at once. The object was fascinating. "Ooh," she murmured, basking in the strange feeling she was getting. "Or maybe I could stay outside for a little bit. As long as I'm inside when Steph gets back, it'll be okay, right?" There was a really, really big pile of brown, red, and yellow things in the middle of the yard. Sweetie used her processor and sped towards an explanation over what they were. Leaves. Apparently they were called leaves, and for some reason they seemed almost to sort of call to her. One thing was for sure, and that was that she couldn't ignore them. Sweetie's tail began to brush against the earth, an idea entering her head. Well, Everpony, I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Next up will be Chapter 11 Reboot, and then there's one more chapter. The story is still not complete yet, but I will keep the story updated. Once I'm done with chapters 11 and 12, I will move on to the next story I have lined up, which is a Stargate and My Little Pony crossover, and it is titled Stargate: The Rise of the Sun God. and I'm really looking forward to reading that one for you. But if you wish to support me, the link to my Patreon is below. I also will soon have my gaming channel up, and I hope you will subscribe to that one as well. But please do spread the word about my channel. Um, I will be doing more content on this channel and my others. Um, I might be starting a vlog channel, so, but I'll give more information and all that in my next update video. But anyway, until next time, Everypony, live long and brony on.